My name is Evelyn. Yesterday, my arrogant husband threw a cup of scalding hot coffee directly at my chest in a crowded New York cafe, simply because he thought my casual clothes embarrassed his high society image. He looked at me with pure disgust, completely convinced I was just a helpless, dependent housewife who relied on his corporate paycheck to survive. He had absolutely no idea that I am actually the anonymous majority shareholder of the multi-million-dollar Wall Street firm he works for. He didn't know that while he was sleeping soundly in the bed I paid for, I was finalizing a federal fraud case with the FBI that would leave him completely bankrupt and in handcuffs by 9 a.m. today. Before I reveal exactly how I executed the perfect corporate takedown and stripped him of every single dime, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story of elegant justice. And do me a quick favor, drop a comment below right now. Where are you watching this video from, and exactly what time is it on your clock? Now let me tell you how the long game began. I pulled my battered 2012 Honda Civic into a tight parallel parking spot 3 blocks away from the Chelsea Espresso Bar. I was exactly 3 minutes late. In New York, 3 minutes can feel like an eternity, but I had a legitimate reason. I had spent the last 2 hours arguing with a stubborn CVS pharmacist and a corporate representative from Blue Cross Blue Shield. Ethan's mother needed her cardiovascular medication pre-authorized, a tedious bureaucratic nightmare that required me to navigate endless automated phone menus. As his wife, I handled the unglamorous domestic logistics, while Ethan focused on climbing the corporate ladder at Vanguard Capital. I didn't mind the support role, but I did mind the blatant disrespect that usually followed it. I stepped out into the crisp Manhattan air, checking my reflection in the car window. I wore a faded gray, oversized sweater, dark jeans, and running shoes, the standard uniform for running errands on a Tuesday morning. I wasn't dressed for a corporate luncheon, but I wasn't supposed to be. I was just dropping off Ethan's forgotten portfolio before heading back to our suburban home in New Jersey. I hurried down the sidewalk, pushing through the heavy glass doors of the upscale cafe. The air inside smelled of expensive roasted coffee beans and quiet wealth. I spotted Ethan immediately at a corner table. He was surrounded by 3 junior executives from his firm, all of them wearing perfectly tailored charcoal suits and identical luxury watches. Ethan was holding court, gesturing widely as he laughed at some inside corporate joke. When his eyes landed on me, his smile instantly vanished. The warmth in his face turned into a mask of pure irritation. I walked over, placing the leather portfolio on the edge of the table. "Sorry I'm late," I said quietly, keeping my voice level. Ethan didn't look at the portfolio. Instead, his eyes scanned my casual attire, lingering on my worn sneakers with an expression of intense disgust. His colleagues shifted uncomfortably. Ethan stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor, drawing the attention of nearby patrons. "Are you out of your mind, Evelyn?" he hissed, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Look at you. You look like you just crawled out of a thrift store. I told you specifically who I was meeting today. You are actively trying to embarrass me, aren't you?" "I was saving your mother from missing her heart medication," I replied, refusing to back down or match his venomous tone. "Your priorities are misplaced, Ethan."
That comment broke whatever restraint he had left. Ethan's face flushed red with rage. Without another word, he reached down, grabbed his freshly served cup of hot Americano, and threw the liquid directly at my chest. The scalding coffee soaked through my sweater, burning my skin instantly. The sharp pain flared across my chest, but I didn't scream. I didn't even flinch. I just stood there, watching the brown liquid drip onto my jeans.
The cafe fell dead silent, followed by a collective gasp from the surrounding tables. Instantly, 3 people at the counter whipped out their iPhones, lenses pointed directly at us, capturing the entire scene for social media. One of Ethan's colleagues stood up, horrified. "Jesus, Ethan, what the hell are you doing?" he muttered, grabbing a stack of napkins.
A barista rushed over from behind the counter, looking panicked. "Ma'am, are you okay? Should I call medical assistance? Do you want me to call the police?"
I raised my hand gently to stop her, looking directly at Ethan. "It's fine," I said, my voice eerily calm. "It was just an accident. No need for the police." I turned around and walked out of the cafe. The burning sensation on my skin was real, but it didn't matter. Tomorrow morning, Ethan was scheduled for the biggest board meeting of his life. He thought he was playing a game of social status, but he didn't realize I owned the board. The real punishment wouldn't happen in a police precinct. It would happen on Wall Street. The 40-minute drive back to our suburban home in Bergen County, New Jersey was completely silent. I didn't turn on the radio. The burn on my chest throbbed with every bump on the road, a sharp, physical reminder of the man I had spent the last 7 years supporting. When I walked through the front door of our pristine, multi-million-dollar colonial house, the quietness of the empty halls was welcoming. I went straight to the master bathroom, peeled off the stiff, coffee-stained sweater, and looked in the mirror. The skin across my sternum was angry, bright red, and already blistering. I applied a thick layer of prescription burn ointment and covered the area with sterile gauze. I didn't shed a single tear. Tears are a waste of emotional capital, and right now I needed every ounce of my focus for the long game. Ethan arrived home just after 8 in the evening. The heavy front doors slammed shut, and his footsteps echoed arrogantly through the hallway. He walked into the kitchen where I was pouring a glass of ice water. There was absolutely no apology in his eyes, only the lingering residue of his corporate self-importance. He tossed his leather briefcase onto the marble kitchen island and looked at me as if I were a minor inconvenience he had already forgotten. "My Brooksblur's crisp white shirt needs to be ironed perfectly tonight, Evelyn," he said, his voice entirely devoid of remorse. "Tomorrow is the annual board meeting at Vanguard Capital. Vance is finally announcing the new senior partner position, and it's mine. I cannot afford a single wrinkle on that stage." I turned around slowly, leaning against the counter, keeping my gaze locked on his. "You burned me, Ethan, in public, in front of your colleagues." He rolled his eyes, loosening his silk tie with a dismissive jerk. "You embarrassed me first, showing up looking like a local thrift store shopper in front of the junior partners. You brought that spectacle on yourself, so don't play the victim now. Just get the shirt done. I'm going to bed." He didn't wait for a response. He walked upstairs, completely convinced of his own invincibility. He truly believed I was just a submissive, dependent housewife who relied on his corporate paycheck to survive. He had no idea that the very house we lived in, the luxury cars in the garage, and the investment firm he worked for were entirely under my control. By midnight, the house was dead silent, save for Ethan's heavy snoring from the master bedroom. I slipped out of bed, walked down the dim hallway, and entered my private study at the back of the house. The room was secured with a biometric fingerprint scanner hidden beneath the wooden doorframe. Inside, I opened a small wall safe concealed behind a framed landscape painting. I bypassed my standard iPhone, which could be tracked or intercepted, and pulled out a secure, encrypted satellite phone. I dialed a specific global number I knew by heart. Harper answered on the very first ring. "Good evening, man," her crisp, professional voice echoed through the receiver. "I assume our timeline has shifted?" "It has," I replied, my voice cold, steady, and measured. "Cancel my entire schedule for tomorrow. Clear my afternoon completely. Then, I want you to pull the primary financial ledgers for Vanguard Capital, specifically the offshore routing numbers tied to the Northbridge account." There was a brief pause on the line as Harper began typing on her end. "Are we initiating the full audit?" she asked. "Yes," I said firmly. "Bring the complete digital forensic file on the internal embezzlement scheme, the one detailing the $2 million shifted into dummy consulting firms over the last 18 months. I want every single transaction receipt, every forged corporate signature, and every IP address match tied directly to Ethan's credentials." "Understood, ma'am," Harper said. "Everything will be uploaded to the boardroom secure network by 8 a.m. Mr. Vance has already been notified of your arrival." I thanked her and hung up the phone. I stood by the window, staring out at the quiet suburban neighborhood. Ethan thought tomorrow was the day he would reach the pinnacle of his career. He had spent months secretly stealing from the company, thinking he was clever enough to outsmart the executive board. He didn't know that I had been watching his every move for a year, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Tomorrow morning, his glorious corporate dream would become a devastating federal nightmare.
The morning sun broke through the blinds of the master bedroom at exactly 6 a.m. Ethan was already up, admiring his reflection in the full-length mirror, adjusting the cuffs of the crisp white Brooks Brothers shirt I had meticulously ironed for him. He looked every bit the successful Wall Street executive he desperately wanted the world to believe he was. I sat up in bed, keeping the blanket pulled high to conceal the gauze padding on my chest. He didn't even ask how the burn was. He didn't care. He grabbed his tailored jacket from the hanger, checked his Rolex, and turned to me with a cold, patronizing smirk. "Today is the day my life changes, Evelyn," he said, adjusting his lapels with immense satisfaction. "Vance is announcing the promotion at the 9 a.m. board meeting. Do not call my phone. Do not show up at the office. Do not do anything to ruin this day for me. You've already done enough damage yesterday."
"I won't ruin your day, Ethan," I replied, my voice smooth and devoid of any sarcasm. "In fact, I'm going to make sure today is entirely unforgettable for you." He didn't catch the underlying edge in my tone. He simply grunted, grabbed his leather portfolio, and walked out of the room. A few moments later, the heavy thud of the front door echoed through the house, followed by the deep rumble of his Audi SUV pulling out of the driveway. The house fell completely silent again. I waited exactly 5 minutes until the GPS tracker on his car showed he was well onto the highway toward Manhattan. The moment he left the suburban perimeter, the housewife persona I had carefully maintained for years was officially retired. I threw off the covers and walked into the massive walk-in closet. I bypassed the front racks filled with the casual, ordinary clothes Ethan assumed were my entire wardrobe. Instead, I pressed a hidden release panel on the back wall, sliding open a secure, climate-controlled vault that held my true identity. Inside hung rows of bespoke corporate armor. I selected a structured midnight blue designer pantsuit from Tom Ford, sharp shoulders, flawless tailoring, and an undeniable aura of absolute authority. I carefully pulled the fine Italian silk blouse over my head, ensuring the fabric covered the medical dressing on my chest. The slight sting of the burn was a useful anchor. It kept me grounded and entirely focused on the execution. Next came the details that high society New York recognizes instantly. I eschewed the flashy, gaudy jewelry Ethan often bought to show off his own wealth. Instead, I fastened a rare, vintage Patek Philippe perpetual calendar watch around my left wrist, a timepiece that cost more than Ethan's annual corporate salary. I added a pair of simple diamond stud earrings. Moving to the vanity, I wiped away the pale, tired look of the stressed housewife. I applied a flawless, minimalist foundation, defined my eyes with sharp, precise eyeliner, and finished with a bold, deep crimson lipstick. The woman looking back at me in the mirror wasn't a victim. She was the majority shareholder of the most powerful investment firm on Wall Street. I grabbed a sleek, black leather briefcase containing the encrypted tablet Harper had prepared for me. As I walked down the stairs, my phone buzzed with a text message from Harper. "The black Mercedes S-Class is waiting at the end of the driveway, ma'am. Mr. Vance and the board are fully prepared for the 9 a.m. presentation." I locked the front door of the house behind me and stepped out into the bright morning air. The driver opened the rear door of the luxury sedan, bowing slightly. I climbed into the leather interior, settling back into the quiet comfort of the vehicle as it accelerated toward the Lincoln Tunnel. The long game was finally coming to an end, and Ethan was about to find out exactly who had been funding his corporate dream all along. The black Mercedes pulled up to the private executive entrance of Vanguard Capital on Wall Street. The security detail bypassed standard check-in protocols, recognizing my biometric ID and clearing the path. I took the private express elevator straight to the 50th floor, the rapid ascent matching the quiet intensity building inside me. The glass doors slid open to a sleek, polished marble reception area overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Harper was waiting for me, holding a secure, encrypted digital folder. She gave me a brief affirmative nod as I walked past. The massive double oak doors of the grand boardroom were just ahead. I could hear the muffled sound of Mr. Vance's voice from inside, addressing the executive board and senior partners. I paused outside the room, looking through the tinted glass panel. I saw Ethan immediately. He was sitting near the head of the conference table, his chest puffed out with pride. He was leaning back in his leather chair, sporting a smug grin as he chatted with the men next to him. He truly believed this morning was his grand coronation. I heard Mr. Vance clear his throat inside, his voice carrying through the room's high-end audio system. Before we finalize the senior partnership promotions, Vance announced to the silent room, we have a historic event. The majority shareholder of Vanguard Capital, the silent owner who holds a 51% controlling stake and has remained anonymous for a decade, has arrived to personally oversee our corporate restructuring. I pushed the heavy doors open, stepping into the room. The sharp, rhythmic click of my high heels echoed against the polished hardwood floor. The entire room went dead silent as 20 high-profile heads turned simultaneously toward the entrance. I walked in with measured, unshakable confidence, my posture completely commanding the space. Ethan's eyes locked onto me. I watched the smug grin instantly vanish from his face, replaced by absolute bewilderment, which quickly twisted into pure fury. He stood up so fast, his leather chair crashed backward against the wall. He forgot every single rule of corporate etiquette, completely losing his composure in front of his peers.
Evelyn, what the hell is this? He shouted, his voice cracking with rage as he pointed a trembling finger at me. Are you insane? How did you even get past security? Mr. Vance, I am deeply sorry about this disruption. This is my ordinary housewife. She clearly rented a designer suit and snuck into the building just to humiliate me on the biggest day of my career. Security, get this crazy woman out of here right now.
The entire room gasped at his unprofessional outburst. I didn't say a word. I simply stood at the foot of the massive mahogany table, looking at Ethan with cold, detached amusement. Mr. Vance's face turned an angry shade of crimson. He slammed his hand down on the table, the sound booming like a gavel. "Shut your mouth immediately, Ethan," Vance roared, his voice cutting through the tension. "You are showing an astronomical level of disrespect. Security is not touching her. You, however, are finished. Your employment with Vanguard Capital is terminated effective immediately for gross misconduct in front of the board. Pack your things and get out of this room."
Ethan froze, his face draining of all color as he looked around the room, realizing no one was coming to his defense. His colleagues looked away in embarrassment. Mr. Vance then turned to me, his aggressive demeanor instantly shifting into a deep, submissive bow. "Welcome, Madam Chairwoman," Vance said, gesturing to the massive leather center seat at the head of the table. "The board is entirely at your disposal."
I walked slowly to the head of the table, pulling out the heavy leather executive chair. I sat down deliberately, placing my briefcase on the polished mahogany surface. Ethan remained standing against the wall, his chest heaving, his jaw dropped in shock. He stared at Mr. Vance, then at the other board members, searching for any sign that this was an elaborate, cruel, practical joke. "Evelyn, what is the meaning of this?" he stammered, his voice losing all its corporate authority. "You own Vanguard? That's impossible. We share a bank account. I know every single dime you have." I didn't answer him. I opened my briefcase, pulled out my encrypted tablet, and docked it into the boardroom's central media console.
"Sit down, Ethan," I said, my voice echoing clearly through the surround sound system. "Or stand. It doesn't matter anymore. Your opinion is no longer relevant to anyone in this room." With a single swipe on my screen, the massive 98-inch display behind me came to life. The Vanguard Capital logo vanished instantly, replaced by a dense financial spreadsheet highlighted in glowing red text. "Gentlemen," I addressed the board, ignoring my husband completely.
As the majority stakeholder, I initiated a comprehensive forensic audit of our Northeast regional portfolio over the last 12 months. Specifically, the high-yield accounts managed by our former senior associate, Ethan. The screen shifted to show a complex, digitized web of corporate entities and offshore routing numbers. Over the past 18 months, exactly $2.4 million was systematically siphoned out of our primary client investment funds, I explained, scrolling through the documents with absolute precision. The funds were routed through a series of shell companies, specifically Northbridge Consulting and Vanguard Logistics Partners. Fake invoices were generated for IT consulting and market research that never actually occurred. Every transaction was authorized using a specific digital signature. I tapped the tablet, blowing up a high-resolution image of the security log. Ethan's personal employee credentials, originating from his corporate laptop, logged into the secure server at 11:45 p.m. from our home IP address on 22 separate occasions.
Ethan stumbled forward, his hand slamming onto the table. The smug, untouchable executive from yesterday was completely gone, replaced by a terrified man trapped in a corner. "This is a setup," he screamed, looking at the board members who were now staring at the screen with absolute horror. "She's fabricating this data. Vance, you know me. Evelyn, stop this madness right now. We are married. You are destroying our family." I looked up from my tablet, my eyes locking onto his bloodshot stare. The burn under my silk blouse flared slightly, a sharp physical reminder of his true character. "We were married, Ethan," I corrected him coldly. "And you didn't think about our family when you threw a boiling beverage at my chest yesterday because my clothes didn't match your corporate aesthetic. You thought I was a helpless housewife. The reality is, I built the foundation you've been standing on." I turned away from him, looking at the speakerphone on the center of the table. I pressed the speed dial button for the reception desk. Harper answered instantly. "Yes, Chairwoman," she said. "Harper, you can send them up now," I instructed smoothly. "They have the full digital file, and the target is currently confined to the boardroom." I cut the line before she could reply. Ethan backed away from the table, his eyes darting frantically toward the heavy oak exit doors. "Who did you call, Evelyn? What did you do?" he whispered, his voice trembling. I stood up, smoothing the front of my pantsuit. "I called the white-collar crime division of the FBI," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. "They've been waiting in the lobby since 8:30 this morning. You didn't just violate corporate policy, Ethan. You committed wire fraud, bank fraud, and grand larceny on a federal level. Your corporate career isn't just over. Your freedom is."
The heavy oak doors clicked open, and two federal agents in dark suits entered. Accompanied by Vanguard's internal security team, Ethan collapsed. The arrogant posture he had maintained for years evaporated in a single second. He dropped to his knees right there on the polished hardwood floor, his hands clutched together in a desperate gesture of supplication. Large, heavy tears began to roll down his cheeks, staining the front of the pristine white Brooks Brothers shirt I had ironed for him just hours ago. "Evelyn, please, I beg you," he choked out, his voice cracking with a pathetic, high-pitched desperation. "We can fix this. We are a family. Think about our 7 years together. Think about everything we've built. You can't do this to me." I stood my ground, looking down at him from the head of the table. My expression remained entirely neutral, my arms crossed elegantly over my chest. The burn beneath my silk blouse throbbed slightly, a cold anchor keeping me detached from his sudden display of emotion. "You didn't think about our family when you were routing millions into offshore accounts, Ethan," I said, my voice cutting through his frantic whimpering. "You thought about yourself." "I did it for us, for our future," he lied, reaching out toward the edge of my desk, though he didn't dare touch me. "And what about my mother? Evelyn, please. She's sick. Her heart condition is fragile. If I go to federal prison, the stress will kill her. Who is going to pay for her medical care? Who is going to take care of her if I'm taken away?
You loved her, Evelyn. Please, do it for my mother.
Using his mother as a human shield was the lowest, most predictable move he could make. It only solidified my resolve. I spent 2 hours yesterday fighting with insurance companies to secure her medication, while you were planning to publicly humiliate me, I replied, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet whisper. I have already arranged for a private medical trust to cover her healthcare expenses directly, funded entirely by my personal estate. She will be taken care of. But you are completely on your own.
I reached back into my leather briefcase and pulled out a thick, bound document stamped with the blue seal of a premium Manhattan family law firm. I slid it across the long mahogany table. It glided smoothly, coming to a dead stop right in front of his trembling hands. These are divorce papers, I stated flatly. Irreconcilable differences. My legal team filed them with the New York Supreme Court 20 minutes ago.
Ethan stared at the document as if it were a death warrant. He scrambled to his feet, holding the papers with shaking fingers. Divorce? You think you can just throw me out and keep everything? Half of everything you own is legally mine, Evelyn. New York is an equitable distribution state. I will sue you for every single dime of this investment firm.
A cold smile touched my lips. This was the moment of absolute leverage, the long game finally paying dividends. You should have read the fine print of federal fraud statutes, Ethan, I said, leaning forward slightly. Under U.S. federal law, specifically the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act and Asset Forfeiture Guidelines, any assets obtained through or commingled with the proceeds of illegal activity are subject to immediate government seizure. You embezzled $2.4 million from Vanguard Capital, a company I solely own. You deposited those stolen funds directly into our joint marital bank accounts to pay off the mortgage on our suburban home and fund your luxury lifestyle.
I watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. His eyes widened in absolute terror as the financial trap snapped shut around him. Every single joint account we share, the New Jersey house, the vehicles, and your personal investment portfolios have already been flagged by the federal prosecutor, I continued, delivering the final, fatal blow. The Department of Justice issued an emergency freeze order on all your financial assets at 8:45 a.m. today. You don't have half of my wealth, Ethan. You don't even have enough money to hire a public defender. You are completely bankrupt.
The senior FBI agent stepped forward, pulling a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his tactical belt. Ethan Miller, the agent stated, checking the warrant brief, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, grand larceny, and embezzlement. The sharp metallic click of the cuffs locking around Ethan's wrist sounded like a final gavel falling in the silent boardroom. Ethan didn't fight back. The anger, the arrogance, and the desperate tears had completely drained out of him, leaving behind a hollow, defeated shell. He stared down at his bound wrists, his mouth opening and closing silently, utterly crushed by the sudden and total destruction of his reality. Lead him out through the main trading floor, I directed the agents, my voice calm, steady, and devoid of malice. Let everyone see the price of betrayal at Vanguard Capital. The agents nodded, gripping Ethan by his arms and forcing him toward the double oak doors. I followed a few paces behind, accompanied by Mr. Vance and the remaining board members. As we stepped out into the expensive, high-ceilinged executive corridor, the quiet atmosphere of the 50th floor vanished.
Word of the scandal had already traveled fast. As the agents paraded Ethan through the rows of glass cubicles and open workspaces, hundreds of junior analysts, traders, and senior partners stopped what they were doing. The very colleagues Ethan had tried to impress the previous day at the Chelsea Cafe were now staring at him. But there was no sympathy in their eyes. The corporate culture of Wall Street is brutal. Once you are exposed as a liability and a thief, you cease to exist. I watched his closest work friends deliberately turn their backs on him. Others pulled out their phones, recording the disgraced executive being marched away in cuffs. a poetic mirror image of the onlookers who had recorded my public humiliation less than 24 hours ago.
Ethan kept his head down, trying to shield his face from the cameras, but there was nowhere to hide. His legacy at Vanguard Capital was permanently erased, replaced by the stigma of a federal indictment. As they reached the elevator bank, he cast one final, desperate look back at me. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply met his gaze with the cold satisfaction of a strategist who had successfully executed a long-term plan. The elevator doors slid shut, removing him from my life forever.
I turned back to Mr. Vance, who was waiting anxiously for my instructions. "Clean out his office immediately," I ordered, my tone shifting back to pure executive authority. "Reassign his portfolios to the junior partners who actually respect the integrity of this firm. I want a full internal review on my desk by Friday morning."
"Right away, Chairwoman," Vance replied, bowing slightly as he hurried off to execute the commands. I walked toward the private executive elevator, Harper waiting by my side with my leather briefcase. "Excellent execution today, ma'am," she said quietly, as the elevator doors opened. "The press release regarding the management restructuring will hit the wire in 10 minutes.
"Perfect," I said, stepping inside. "Take the rest of the day off, Harper. We earned it."
The elevator descended rapidly, leaving the stress and corporate warfare of the 50th floor behind. When the doors opened into the grand marble lobby, the bright New York sunlight streamed through the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows. I walked out of the revolving doors and stood on the bustling sidewalk of Wall Street. The crisp afternoon air felt incredibly clean, washing away the lingering scent of stale coffee and domestic deceit. I pulled a pair of dark, oversized designer sunglasses from my pocket and slipped them on, shielding my eyes from the glare. A new chapter was beginning. I had spent 7 years playing the submissive housewife, hiding in the shadows while a lesser man took the credit. But the game was over, the board was clear, and I had won. I stepped into the waiting Mercedes, ready to live life entirely on my own terms.